welcome to another Watercolor Wednesday. We're going to be painting this little bunch of Bougainvillea flowers today. I've drawn them in my Arteza sketchbook, and I'm going to be using one or two of these brushes. There's also my classics paints. They're from the Art Philosophy Primat Watercolor Confections, and it's the Classics collection. This is a silver black velvet brush. I will list all these products below in case you're interested. And I'm going to be using this pink, which is kind of, I would equate it to either a permanent rose or an opera pink or a mixture of the two. So I'm making quite a watery mixture of that because I want it to be quite pale. And I'm also using some of this slightly more red color, and I'm also going to add quite a bit of water to that. And I'm wanting to show off the translucence of the watercolor paints as I paint this. I do love the silver black velvet brush, and I just want to quickly see if I've got the right sort of color here on a scrap of paper, and checking that one. And I think those two will work quite well, so I'm going to go with that. Excuse me. So now I will need to just get myself organized, and then we can start. I think I'm just going to use a little bulldog clip here to keep the paper flat. And I'm using this black velvet brush. It's a size 8, I think. I've got some other brushes out, but I love the black velvet brush. I just thought I'd bring the slightly harder ones along in case I needed them. I'm using my kneaded eraser to just erase a little bit more of the pencil outlines that I've done, and I'll do this piecemeal as I paint. If I erase them all, I sometimes lose track of what I'm trying to paint, and I find it quite difficult to know where I'm going. So I thought I'll try this method. And I'm just painting very lightly, and I really hope this turns out nicely. So my bulldog clip has fallen off, but I think I'm just going to leave it like that. Now I've got to try and choose which petals to paint where, because I don't want to have the paint bleeding into each other. I would like sort of fairly crisp outlines to the petals, but I do want the translucence to show, so I'd like a little bit of overlapping here and there. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. And I'm just going to generally be painting. Whoops, throwing things around. The minute I film something always goes wrong. It's amazing how kind of nervous one gets when you're doing something and people are watching. So silly. I love the point that these brushes come to. I'm going to try doing 2 outlines and then filling them both in. So I think rather than talking through this whole thing, it's pretty explanatory what I'm doing. I just dabbed some of the water off on my paper towel because I felt like it was too watery. It was making too much of a puddle. You can see there's a bit of a puddle on that right-hand one. What I am doing here is dropping in some of the darker color just to add a little bit of shading, and it's spreading particularly nicely on the left ones, which have dried just a little bitty. I'm going to put some over there and make this a bit darker, and that's bleeding a little bit into the one above. Just rinsing my brush out and drying it off, and then I'm going to suck some of that up. And I want to suck a little bit more. You can see the kind of puddle, and I want to make the outline a bit cleaner. So I hope it's clear what I'm doing, and I think I'm going to zoom in even closer and put some music on so that you can watch and see, and I hope that you enjoy what you're watching. If you do, please beg of you to leave me a like. That would be absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So I must say I find this system of doing it with erasing little bits here and there rather than the whole thing has been much easier for me than trying to see the very faint lines. And you can see the way I'm going around the page so that I'm allowing certain petals to dry, and I'm using different what is the word, different strengths of the pink. So some have got more water in them and some have got a bit more pigment, and I'm using some of the red and some of the red mixed with the pink just to make it all look much more as if it is something that is in nature. So I'm going to add another piece of music so you can listen to some more. So once those first petals had dried, I've come back and I'm doing the next set. So some of them are able to overlap, and I'm trying to kind of get some behind, and I love the translucence of the watercolors where you can still semi-see the lines of some of the petals that are behind the ones. And that is kind of what you see in Bougainvillea petals. They have a papery, almost transparent quality, so I wanted to use that quality in the watercolors with my painting. I have sped this up a little bit because I don't want the video to bore you to death, because I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And I think that I might just fast forward to where I've done all the petals and show you how I paint the little stalks and the leaves. So before I get to the stalks and leaves, I've still got a few more petals to paint, but I left the whole lot to dry again before carrying on with this next lot. I've also zoomed out a bit so that you can perhaps see more of what it looks like with the water and everything. I'm using some more of this paint and I'm mixing them together this time. So I'm getting a mixture of the two and adding water, getting a bit of a watered down version, and trying to choose carefully which ones where I'll go now. I wonder where we would be without paper towel when we did watercolors. I use mine so much. I do sometimes try and use an old cloth, but I prefer the paper towel. It's perhaps even a little bit more absorbent than an old cloth. I have an old face cloth, which is pretty absorbent, but I just enjoy using the paper towel. Decided to rest my hand on a piece of paper towel because of my old friend hand cream that I'm always using. I sometimes get a little bit of hand cream on the other page and then it resists the water, so that doesn't help when you're trying to do watercolors. So I want to drop in some darker color just at the shadow bit there. I have been finding the system of outlining and then filling it in has been helpful for me. And when I watch myself paint, I see that I do tend to hold my paintbrush quite close to the edge as I'm trying to do the more finer details. I do try when I'm doing some of the looser florals to hold my hand a little bit further back on the paintbrush, because I did a class where they recommended that. But I find that really difficult. I'd love to know where you place your hand. At the moment, there's sort of the same as if it was a pencil or a color pencil. Kind of works for me. I was thinking the other day when I was painting something in a coloring book how the first time I picked up a paintbrush, I didn't actually know what to do with the thing, and it felt so awkward in my hand. And compared to a pencil, which I'd been using before, which is sort of solid when you place it down on the paper, there's this give in the paintbrush, and it sort of, I don't know how to describe it, it left me feeling out of control and I didn't know what to do. And I was thinking about that the other day, and now it's actually my preferred medium. I really love the softness of the paintbrush. So if you are feeling out of control and like you don't know what to do when you're using a paintbrush, persevere a little bit, because for me it's really become something that I absolutely love. And it really doesn't matter if things don't work out all that well in the beginning or even later. For me, it's all in the process and in the pleasure and the privilege of being in the moment and spending time just creating some art. It brings me so much joy, and I hope it will bring the same to you. So we're nearly at the place now to add some stems and leaves. Okay, so all the petals are painted, and now I'm using a brown. This little set only has one brown. None of them have, well, they may have names, but I don't know what the names are. And so I'm just using that, and I'm actually mixing a little bit of red in with it, because it was quite a cold brown and I wanted it to just be a little bit warmer. And I'm using, this is a Craftimo brush size 2. It's from the bamboo set. And it's not a very watery mixture of paint. I'm using a fairly thick mixture of paint because I don't want to have to do too many layers or any extra layers of these thin little branches. I did draw them in with pencil, and I'm simply going over them with my paintbrush. I enjoy the Craftimo brushes. They have a nice sort of snap to them, so I find for doing fine lines a slightly firmer brush is sometimes easier for me to manage. I'm quite nervous doing these lines, and I do turn my book because I find painting in a certain direction easier than trying to keep the book in the one direction all the time. I haven't got my little bunch of Bougainvillea all that centered on the page. I should have looked at that when I started, or maybe done an extra branch over to the left, but it is what it is, and it's a sketchbook for practicing, so I've really enjoyed painting these. I always enjoy painting things in pink. It's a color that really makes me happy. So I think there's probably one more little stalk to go. We used to try and grow Bougainvillea, but we've never been particularly successful with them. One drives past some of the most incredibly splendid colors. They really are a beautiful plant. They make a wonderful creeper. So now I think to go start with the leaves. But first I want to try and erase any bits of the pencil that are left around the petals. And now I want to mix up a green for the leaf. This looks to me like a sap green that's in this palette. And I don't know that I want such a bright color. I might try and dull it down by adding a bit of the brown to it, or even the red or the pink. I'll see. I'm going to try a little bit more brown. It's not bad. That's going more towards the olive. I'm going to try a bit of the red. The reason the red dulls it down is that it's a complementary color. It's on the opposite side of the color wheel to green, and if you add a complementary color, it can turn it into brown, so it dulls it down. Now I've just added a little bit of black, getting the color I want, and that's not too dark, so we're going to add a bit more green, and so we go on until we find exactly what I want. There we have it. And now I'm going to paint my leaves. So I'm doing the method of point, press, point. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And sometimes I just paint the outline that I want and fill it in again the same way I did the petals. I often seem to mess up my drawings with the leaves, my paintings, so I'm trying really hard here to try and get the right kind of movement and shape with these leaves. It's funny for me when I watch other watercolor painters, they seem to do the leaves so easily. I don't find leaves all that easy. I must do some more leaf studies. Do you find painting leaves easy? I find trying to figure out where to put them on the plant also, and if I try to paint a bouquet, I find it quite difficult knowing where to place the leaves. So I need to do far more bunches of flowers and bouquets and studies like that. But so far I'm really, really liking this little picture. I love the look of the little Bougainvillea petals. I didn't quite get the transparency I was hoping for. I seem to have not got the lines shining through that I thought might happen, but other than that I'm quite happy with it. I mustn't overdo it with the leaves and do too many. So I think I've probably got enough leaves now. Now I need to paint in the little stamen thingies that come in the middle of the flower. And then we will be done, I think. So I'm going with the red again, but quite a thick mixture this time. And my thin little number 2 brush. Just dulling that down a little bit as well with the brown. I want it to be a deeper red. I think that's another thing that's great about watercolor paints. I mean, I know one loves to buy new paints and things, but in a way it's so easy to mix colors, so you don't need as many hundreds of different colors as you do with color pencils. I'm just doing 3 or 4 little stamens. Trying to decide exactly where to paint them. I actually quickly went to look up a reference photo again, just as that I could have some idea of where they come in the flower. Didn't have any real Bougainvillea flowers to check. I did wonder whether I should paint some of the little fine veins on the leaves, on the petals. And I thought of doing it, and then I thought, no, this is a loose representation of a Bougainvillea flower. It's not a botanical painting, so I've just left it as it is. And I'm really quite chuffed with this one, as you may have gathered. Trying to curve my stamens so that they don't look stiff. Just putting a little dot at the end for each one. And I should turn my book so that I don't get my fat hand in the wet paint. That's always another so upsetting when you've painted something and next thing you know, splat, you popped your hand in the middle of it all. So I think we've finished, and I really hope you like how this has turned out, and I want to thank you so much for spending time with me. Have a wonderful week. Bye now.